Hello, everyone. This is Kevin from the Super Dharma Bros, and I am going solo today. We're going to talk about wholesome and unwholesome states, qualities, actions, thoughts, the whole jazz. Because sometimes when people see the Noble Eightfold Path, they see right view, right intention, right speech, and they think that if they don't do those things, it's the opposite. It's wrong view, wrong intention, wrong action. But sometimes it's not as simple as that. So we gotta look at what is wholesome and unwholesome, because those sort of are like not definitively right, not definitively wrong, but they sort of work toward uh, the higher goal of right view, right intention, and all that jazz, until it becomes like second nature. So when we think about wholesome and unwholesome, there are what are called roots to those actions, to those thoughts, and to those words. And so we're going to look at those roots. There are three on the unwholesome side and three on the wholesome side.
Be. Don't put words on it. Just feel. But if you can't help words running in your head, don't instill.
Okay, so there are three roots when it comes to unwholesome qualities, unwholesome states. And those are greed, hatred, and delusion. Look at. So, unwholesome qualities, actions, thoughts, they're thought of in the literature as unhealthy, harmful, grounded in ignorance, which is horrible, and resulting in dukkha, which is suffering or unsatisfactoriness. So, let's take a look at the three a little more closely. So, greed, or like I said, sometimes it's lust as well. Lust is sort of like a type of greed, has a characteristic of grasping at an object. So there's something that we really want, so we grasp at that object, even though we may not be able to have it. And so with lust, it's maybe a person that we find very attractive. We may not be able to have that person, but we sort of grasp at the idea of having that person, as our significant other or whatever, our partner. And also, greed is not giving up. So you're not able to let go of that. You're just like, man, I want that so much. And the cause of greed is a perceived enjoyment of an object. Greed is sometimes thought to have a characteristic of taking a being with the flow of craving, because we sort of lose our sense of peace and tranquility, and we go with the flow of craving, which means that ultimately we say, yeah, I crave this, and what's wrong with that? And to some extent, there is nothing wrong with that. But if you're on the path, craving is remember, craving and clinging to that craving is dukkha. So that's what we're trying to reduce. So if we're able to be aware of that, then we can at least recognize when it's happening and then take some sort of action so that we don't go with the flow of craving. Now, the immediate antidote to greed is generosity or charity, but it's sometimes extremely difficult to do that. Now, let's move on to hatred. So hatred is sometimes also called aversion, and I forget what the Pali word is for hatred. I could probably look it up if I wanted to, but that's going to take a second. But the Pali term for hatred or aversion literally means the friction of a couple of the two things, and that's usually in the mind, and it has characteristics of savageness. I mean, think about it. When we're angry and are in a state of hatred, we're not very kind. And hatred or aversion burns like a fire. I mean, sometimes when I get angry, it feels like my head is on fire. And the proximate cause of hatred or aversion is basically annoyance. And annoyance can be slight annoyance to blind rage. That's sort of like, if you wanted a scale, that's what it would be, and then everything in between. And I read this in the literature, which is very interesting. It's poison mixed with medicine. But think about that. You're taking your medicine, you think, but it's actually poison. And actually another name for the three unwholesome roots is the three poisons. All right, so then there's delusion. Now, delusion is in every state. So whether you have greed and hatred, those are also under the influence of delusion. Now, sometimes delusion is also translated as ignorance. It's considered wrong view in the Samyutta Nikaya 42.3 because it's not helping us see the world as it is. And it's characterized by having a sense of blindness as to what the world is really like, a sense of unknowing, non-penetration of the nature of an object, darkness. It obscures our view of how things really are. And this can be any object, really. For example, I think one of the things that gives me a lot of pleasure in life is being able to sit down, eat some pizza, and drink soda. However, I'm not looking at it as it really is. All those things are transitory, therefore they can't really give me much in the way of happiness. So I'm looking at it the wrong way, and my intention there is definitely not wholesome. It's more like it's greed and delusion there, because I want to feel good, so I will do anything to do that. And the cause of delusion is unwholesome attention or improper attention to things. Now, this term is a little bit awkward, but appropriate attention is what helps us see things as it really is. Now, one of the things that cause improper attention is boredom. And so we're like, oh my gosh, there's nothing going on. But actually, there's a lot going on, even when we're not taking any action. So appropriate attention helps us see all the things that are going on at the present moment. And like I said, delusion can be considered a root for all unwholesome actions by body, speech, and thought, because we're not seeing things as they are. Greed, when we're looking at say I'm looking at a woman on the bus with a bunch of lust, I'm not seeing her as she really is. I'm just seeing the beautiful qualities that I can see from the surface. And the antidote to that would be, anyway, the stage of decay of a corpse. Because underneath the surface, we're all made of the same stuff. And a lot of that stuff is not something that we find desirable. Some people in blood, for example, is a no-go. Now, these three unwholesome roots are unwholesome in themselves, so that's why it's considered basically the root. They are the roots of unwholesome qualities, because within themselves, they are unwholesome. And all of them can inflict one person's will on another being, which is unwholesome in this, according to this philosophy, way of life, religion, whatever you'd like to call it. Now, misfortune befalls those beings that engage in these actions, engage in this speech or thought, like a tree being strangled by parasitic vines. That's found in the Anguttara Nikaya 334. And that's because with unwholesome intention, unwholesome actions, come unwholesome results. That's the law of cause and effect, the law of karma. They cause harm, stress, and discomfort. That's found in Samyutta Nikaya 323. And if you want more about definitions, you can look at the Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta 9, and that clearly defines a lot of these definitions. Now, the all, which is all our senses, their organs, the contact that takes place at them, they are aflame in the Samyutta Nikaya 3528 with greed, hatred, and delusion. We got to be very careful. We got to be very mindful. And the remedies for all of these states range from recollection of the Buddha to generosity to equanimity. And so I'm going to just look at them real quick. So greed, the counterpart is generosity. Hatred, the counterpart is loving kindness or or goodwill. And delusion, the sort of like the antidote to that would be examination of phenomena, because then we'll be able to break through delusion. But there are 3 other roots. So the good news is here. There are wholesome roots as well. And wholesome qualities and roots are considered to be free of illness, clear-minded, knowledgeable, and understanding of truth, well-being, and contentment. So let's take a look at them a little bit. So non-greed, a lack of desire for an object. Non-adherence, not grasping. So completely counter to what greed is, having the ability to put that burden down, or to put down whatever it is we desire. That's not easy. Let me tell you, it's something that takes a lot of reflection, and as a layperson, that's something that I can have a lot of difficulty with, because there are just certain things where it's like it happens, and it's like, man, if only I were wealthier or better looking and all that, I could have all of these things, and I grasp at that. And it's not something that I should really be too concerned about. I should just be able to look at it with wisdom and say, okay, I'm going to put that down, and I'm going to move on from that. But it's really tough, because it's one of those things where it's like the bottom part of your CNS and brain, those are the drives that have kept us alive for so long. It's very difficult to ignore them, or in this case, to acknowledge that they're telling us something and then move on. So non-hatred is a lack of savagery, non-opposing, removal of annoyance, removal of the fire or fever, and agreeableness. So annoyance can be really tough to remove. As someone who's worked with 5 and 6-year-olds on a regular basis, it's so difficult sometimes, because children do it, adults do it, it doesn't matter what the age, something's going to annoy us. And the removal of annoyance, there's some formulaic ways to go about it, but the one that works best for me, and it's not for everyone, is to recognize that they are a being, and they will experience the results of their karma, so cause, effect. Sometimes they don't intend to annoy you, but if they're an adult, usually they are. Unless of course they don't know you, then it's a different story, because they don't know what annoys you. But unwholesome actions lead to unwholesome results in the future. And that sort of brings me a little bit of comfort, because it's like, well, they're annoying right now, but eventually it's gonna happen to them. And it could happen to them pretty soon. We don't know. That's the thing about karma, is we don't really know when the results come. And then non-delusion penetrates nature of objects. It's like an arrow that penetrates fully into the target. It's sure penetration. It illuminates an object, sort of like a lamp does, so that we can see it more clearly. And it's a non-bewildered state. So we basically have the knowledge that we need in order to see things more clearly. So, like I said, non-greed, that's sort of like a generosity. So, freely giving. Non-hatred is out of goodwill. That could also be giving. That could be donations. Or just showing someone that you care. That would count too. Non-delusion. So that's seeing things with wisdom, right? So the antidote for delusion was examination of phenomena. Well, non-delusion is basically that, and then having the knowledge based upon that contemplation and reflection. Now, in themselves, these things are skillful. They don't wrongly inflict our will on other beings, And the good fortune that is achieved based on these actions, these thoughts and speech, grows like a tree unhindered by parasitic vines, leading to wholesome fortune. And that's because the roots that the parasitic vines thrive on, greed, hatred, and delusion, are cut off completely at the root. And once again, the Majjhima Nikaya 9 states more clearly what the definitions are. So I also wanted to put a disclaimer out there. You got to be aware that our states can jump from wholesome to unwholesome and unwholesome to wholesome in the blink of an eye. So something that begins as wholesome, charity perhaps, can lead to unwholesome states and vice versa. One example is there was a householder who gave charity to a private Buddha in the past. But after giving, the householder's like, oh man, I shouldn't have done that because I could have used that food for my own servants. Now, from the wholesome part of that thing, which was the giving, he had rebirth in the human plane as a wealthy merchant. But because of the unwholesome aspect of that, he was not able to enjoy his wealth. And in a future rebirth, went to one of the various Buddhist hells that we have. So that's one thing to be aware of. Is my intention wholesome here? Is it rooted in generosity? Is it rooted in goodwill? Is it rooted in wisdom? So I hope that gives you a little bit to think about, and I hope that you can take this lesson and really think about, how many wholesome things do I do each day? How many unwholesome things do I do each day? What can I do to change it if there's too much unwholesome? How can I increase the number of wholesome things that I do, that I say, or that I think? Okay, everyone, so take care of yourselves, and I will chat with you in our next full-length episode. All right, everyone. Bye for now.